what impact do yields, or put it another way, the gross revenue of a property, what impact does that actually have on your borrowing capacity? Because some people would argue that, it doesn't really do anything for you and it's a fool's errand and stuff. But based on conversations that I've had with you, and in fact,
Yep.
just putting it out there, we've had 3 of our clients in the last 2 weeks, some of them working with you, but some working with other brokers as well,
Yep.
who have actually come back and said that their borrowing capacity has increased, right?
Yep.
So when they started, their borrowing capacity was X. We've then helped them to buy a property, and now they actually have more borrowing capacity than when they started.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
That seems like madness, right? Because most people believe that there'll be a degradation rate consistently. Now, I'm sure it's not an absolute, so I'm interested to understand if you could talk to that for a minute.
Yeah, so yields do play an important part in, I guess, and as we said before, Goose, it's all about asset selection. I think your initial investment property portfolio, it's looking for those cash flow positive, properties, which obviously have a higher yield, because the impact the yield has on a borrowing capacity. I mean, there are caveats to this.
Of course. There's 400 lenders, so none of this is going to apply to every one of them, right? So
there are, but you're looking on average. I mean, every sort of $10,000, let's say gross rental income that you're achieving in your properties, that's going to add to around $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 in additional borrowing power.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop you there, because what that sounds to me like is we're talking about the debt to income ratio, right? Is that right?
Yes.
So for those, maybe we could talk to that for a minute. So, but for a lot of people don't understand what debt to income ratio is, but put it simply, if you earn $100,000 of income from your job, let's just say you've got a job and you earn $100,000 salary, lenders will assess your ability to access debt based on, aside, they'll factor in your current expenses and whatever, but also, but baseline will be like, if you earn 100 grand, we'll offer you a multiple of that $100,000 in terms in available debt.
Correct.
And that multiple is usually between 5 and 8, and depending on the lender. But a more common mental reference point seems to be sort of 6 or 7 times. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's correct. Yeah. So I mean, on average, if you earn $100,000, the lender should be willing to lend you roughly around $600,000.
Yeah, got it. And so on that basis, for every dollar you increase your income on your personal income statement, or in other words, taxable income or money coming in, the revenue you generate, however you want to phrase it, for every dollar you earn, that should have a multiple on it. So
correct.
If you were to buy a property that produced, let's say you bought a $500,000 property that was yielding at 6% gross, that would mean that it has a $30,000 gross revenue. So that means for the whole year, you would receive $30,000 worth of rent. Right. And on that basis, depending on the lender would then look at that $30,000 of gross income and say, oh, that's more income. So you, Johnny, might have a $100,000 salary, but then also you're going to add another $30,000 of revenue to your personal income, which would take the total amount from, let's use 5 just for simple maths. Let's use a 5 times debt to income ratio. So if you had $100,000, if Johnny started with $100,000 of income, he might be able to access $500,000 worth of debt. Then if he was to buy a $500,000 property that produced $30,000 of gross revenue, the banks would then look at that and say, well, we'll give you 5 times as well on the $30,000. So then that would increase his borrowing capacity by another $150,000. So the total available debt that Johnny would have then would be not $500,000, but actually $650,000.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct. I mean, obviously they will factor in the liability as well that obviously Johnny's got, but yes, that is correct. And where we mentioned before about being strategic, I mean, often the banks shade the rental income. So they'll only use 80%, but we do have lenders that will take 100% of rental income. So what you just explained there, Goose, in theory is correct. So higher yielding properties will increase your borrowing, capacity, will increase your borrowing power, will increase, I guess, your ability to access credit.
The way that I like to say, it's just going to give people so they don't think it's some kind of like crazy scheme, it stretches your borrowing capacity.
It stretches your borrowing capacity.
Yeah. So rather than necessarily, I'm just going to get a continuously, a fountain of youth kind of thing when it comes to property, and I'll just never run out of borrowing. It stretches it, it elongates it, allows you to do more.
Correct. Yeah. And as I said before, knowing which lenders will take 100% of that and multiple, and then a multiple of that will obviously stretch your borrowing capacity, as you mentioned.